And we are back with another video. Welcome back to College Football Roundup, the football expert, or American Football Network, wherever you may be watching this video. Welcome back. And today we are doing our SEC West prediction. Lincoln, how are we doing? And what are your thoughts as we enter into some SEC West talk?
Doing pretty good. So our SEC East videos, they did really good. So hopefully these for the West will do just as good, if not better. I think this is going to be a little bit more of I think we know the bottom teams in this division, but I think on the when it comes to the top 4 or 5 teams, they could go either way. Whereas I think the East is more up and down. Other than the top 2 teams, I think they're pretty well locked in. Obviously, you disagreed in the video. If you guys haven't check that one out, definitely go check that out. But yeah, I'm excited for the football season, and I think the SEC West will be a really good and close, challenging division.
Yeah, definitely. So we will start off at the bottom, work our way to the top. Lincoln, who do you have at number 7?
So at number 7, I have the Auburn Tigers. They bring in a new head coach in Hugh Freeze, a new system and everything to go with that. They return 3 starters on offense, 8 on defense. Both of those units were not very good. Then you add in the fact that you bring in a new quarterback in Peyton Thorne, who's never really proven himself. You have a few tough games. You go on the road to LSU, on the road to Arkansas. You do get Bama at home. At Texas A&M may be a tough game as well. You get Ole Miss and Miss State at home, Georgia at home. So at least some of your tougher games you do get at home. And one I'm interested to see is that second game of the week on the road at Cal. I think that game could be a potential game that they lose just because we don't know what either team's going to be. I think Auburn will win, but who knows what Cal's going to be or Auburn. So I think it's probably going to be a 5-7, 6-6 season for Auburn. I think that's a good season under Hugh Freeze. It's one of those times where the team improves, but the record doesn't really show. I think that would be a good season for Auburn.
Yeah, definitely. My number 7 team is Auburn as well. I think that Auburn, you're looking at a tough schedule, and not a tough schedule in the sense that it's tougher than anybody else in the SEC West, but a tough schedule in the sense that you have to play a road game at Vanderbilt, you have to play a road game against Texas A&M, and you have to play a road game against Cal. Those are 3 teams that are beatable. They're definitely beatable teams, but with them all being on the road, it makes those matchups that are beatable and possible to win a lot more difficult. And when you're looking at that certain ability, I think that you're looking at a much tougher schedule when a lot of those 50-50 games are on the road. And really, I think the only 50-50 game that is at home, in my personal opinion, would be Miss State. And outside of that, you're looking at a tough stretch of games. A lot of your 50-50 games are on the road. So I think that that's the reason why I have them in 7th and not ahead of anybody. So
I agree for sure. So my number 6 team is going to be Texas A&M. We'll see what, A&M does this season. They're a bit of a question. They have a lot of talented pieces. They have a talented quarterback coming in Connor Weekman, 73 of 132 last year, 896 yards, 8 touchdowns, no picks, but in limited action. But it did lead that big win against LSU last year to close out the season. But they went 5-7 last season. I just don't really see them being much better than that. They do have some tough games. I think they lose to Arkansas and Arlington. I think they lose to Bama at home, lose at Tennessee. Lose at Ole Miss, could potentially lose to South Carolina at home, could potentially lose on the road to Miami. Even Auburn, like we talked about, they could potentially lose to Auburn at LSU. So there's a lot of games that I see as 50-50, or a lot of them really should say in favor of Texas A&M's opponent in those games. I don't really like, A&M coming into this season. I don't like a lot of what they have. I think that they're in a tough spot, and I really think that A&M's going to have another terrible season.
Yeah, definitely. In my opinion, I think that A&M is close to that number 6 spot, but I think at the end of the day, I think Miss State will take that number 6 spot. I do think that Zach Arnett I think he's a solid coach, but there's a lot of issues that you're going to have to deal with the passing of Mike Leach. Obviously, that was a big loss to that program, and really just kind of you have a lot of issues that you need to address. And I think that last year it was one of your best seasons in a long time as Miss State, and having a 9-4 record, which is the best record in 6 years since 2017. So maybe 5 years. But it is definitely a team and an environment in which you definitely have to improve. But outside of Will Rogers, I really just don't see this team defensively playing very well. And I think that they just lack any sort of ability to do anything outside of passing the ball.
So my number 5 team, kind of the same reason what you just talked about, is Arkansas. I don't think they're going to really have any offensive ability outside of running the ball for the most part. I don't really like their receiver core. Overall, they only return 4 starters on offense, being the core. Now, they do return their biggest 2 players in KJ Jefferson and Rocket Sanders, but they went 7-6 last year, 3-5 in the SEC. So, yeah, they returned their best 2 players, but they didn't have a very good season last year. And then they also returned the center and left guard. But, they went 6-6 in the regular season last year, losing to A&M, Alabama, Mississippi State, Liberty, LSU, and at Missouri. So they lost a few games that they definitely probably should have won, would have been picked to win for sure going into the game. But they lost them. They have some tough games this year, on the road at LSU, A&M again, on the road at Ole Miss, on the road at Alabama, Miss State at home, on the road at Florida. Depending on what you think Florida's going to be. So they definitely have a lot of 50-50 or even, games where they're not going to go into it favored. And so, I think Arkansas is going to have a good season, but I do think that they're going to finish 5th and you go somewhere like 7-5, 8-4.
Yeah, I will disagree with that, but I will wait to spread my disagreement until I rank them later on. At number 5 for me, I have the Texas A&M Aggies. Basically for all the same reasons that Lincoln said. I really think that this team, they're going to have some struggles. This is a team that just simply put is just kind of bad on the offensive end, and I can't reasonably put them higher than 5, especially when Auburn has the ability, if Hugh Freeze is able to get everything together, to be better than number 5. And I think that I like this Texas A&M team. I just can't in good conscience put them higher than this. And to be honest, me putting them at 5 is higher than I really want to give them credit for, just because they were so bad last year. But I don't think that Auburn and Miss State are in as good of positions program-wise, and I just think that Jimbo Fisher will turn it around to a degree enough to get that 5th spot in SEC West.
Yeah, so my number 4 team is Mississippi State. I think they return a lot of pieces. They return Will Rogers, who arguably the best quarterback in the SEC, definitely a top 3 QB in the SEC. They get a lot of their tougher games at home, LSU at home, Alabama at home, Kentucky at home, Ole Miss at home. They go on the road to South Carolina, on the road to Arkansas, and on the road to A&M. Those are really the only tough games on the road that they have. I think on the road to Auburn is, that's not really, any scare there. But the schedule lines up good for them. They only have 4 road games, so they get 8 at home, 4 on the road. That lines up nicely for them. They get a lot of they start out the season with Southeast Louisiana, then Arizona before they play LSU. So they get 2 easier games before they go and play the big dog LSU. Then do they
have to play on the road against Arizona, or do they?
No, they get them at home.
Okay.
Then they have a tough little 3-game stretch with LSU at South Carolina, Alabama, but then they get Western Michigan before going on the road to Arkansas, then at Auburn before going to Kentucky, then at A&M, then they get Southern Miss before Ole Miss. So the schedule lines up pretty good for them. Again, I think Will Rogers is a great quarterback, top 3 in the SEC for sure, and I think that Zach Arnett is a very good coach. Or will be a very good coach. Obviously, he's only coached 1 game where they beat Illinois in the bowl game 19-10. and who knows how much of that was him coaching or how much of them playing for Mike Leach. But I do think that the offensive scheme will be very similar, and Will Rogers will have a great year, and Mississippi State will finish fourth.
At number 4 for me, I have Ole Miss. I'm going to go with the Rebs in this spot. I think that Ole Miss, they're going to have solid quarterback play. I don't think that they're going to have spectacular quarterback play. I think that Spencer Sanders, a solid quarterback. I think that Jackson Dart, solid quarterback. Nothing special with either of them. You're not going to get any sort of substantial, like, Heisman-worthy quarterback play from either of them, unless if Spencer Sanders is playing Notre Dame, of course. But in all honesty, you're looking at a team that definitely they have some pieces, but I just think they're a middle team. They're just in the middle. They're kind of a middling team. I think Ole Miss is solid, not great, not terrible, but I think they kind of end in the middle.
So for me, I have Ole Miss at number 3. They return 8 starters on that offense. It's been a top 10 offense the last 3 years, and I don't see that really changing. I expect Dart to be better than he was last year. He threw for almost 3,000 yards, 20 touchdowns, 11 picks. I expect those numbers to be better. And I think with the top 10 offense, something that some of these teams below them are going to lack, in Auburn and A&M and Arkansas and probably even Mississippi State to a degree, they're going to lack offense. And they get some solid pieces back on defense. They get some solid players in on defense. And might I mention they add the ever-dangerous Zachary Franklin, the wide receiver transfer from UTSA, who's probably a top 15 wide receiver in the country. And you add that to a group of receivers that already has Jordan Watkins and Trey Harris and Chris Marshall and Jalen Knox. Now wait till you add in a top 15 receiver in the country and give them a very good running back in Quinshon Judkins and a very good quarterback in Jackson Dart and Spencer Sanders. I think they're probably top 5 in this conference. I think Ole Miss is going to be great offensively, but what does the defense do? But I think if they go 4-4 in the SEC, 5-3, that's probably good enough to get them at that 3 or 4 spot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So at number 3, I have Arkansas Razorbacks, like Lincoln was talking about. I'm very opposite of what he is with Arkansas. I do think that the returning of those 2 starters of Rocket Sanders and KJ Jefferson, and it's not even just Rocket Sanders. They still have AJ Green and Rashid Dubson. You're just looking at 3 just really solid running backs. And yeah, their passing game's not going to be fantastic, but that's not the point. That has nothing to do with what Arkansas does. And the other thing is you bring in a new offensive coordinator after the departure of Kendall Briles. And I don't think you're going to do as much play action. I don't think you're going to get KJ Jefferson as hurt and as injured. And I think that he's going to be able to make some of those more basic passes. And yes, a lot of the wide receivers are gone, and they're going to have a lot to replace. There is no Matt Landers. There is no Jaden Hazelwood. There is no Trey Knox. But I think overall this team has the depth offensively in order to get points on the board. And defensively, I think that they just have the bodies up front to just be able to maul people and slow people down enough and stuff like that. And if you want to look at their schedule, you play Western Carolina, you play Kent State, you play BYU to open up the season. Those are 3 pretty easy games, especially with the BYU game being at home. That's a very winnable game. Then you have a road game against LSU. That will be incredibly difficult. You'll probably lose that one. But then you have games like Texas A&M. You have a road game against Ole Miss. But I think that this is an Ole Miss team that if you're physical with them, I don't think Ole Miss can play physical back. And then so on and so forth. You go to the last 4 weeks right after the bye week, and you have at Florida, Auburn, FIU, and Missouri. Yeah, you could very easily win all 4 of those games. I think that you're in a good spot with this team to be able to make a jump back up to that top half of the SEC West.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it. What you talk about with Ole Miss, I agree. I don't think Ole Miss is going to be able to compete with them, physically at the line of scrimmage. But I also think that with Ole Miss's talented receivers, they don't need very long from that offensive line before somebody's open against this Arkansas secondary. and could probably still throw for 350 plus yards on them. But my number 2 team is the Alabama Crimson Tide. I don't like what they have at quarterback. They still don't really know. Apparently, the talk now is between Jalen Milroe and Tyler Buckner. Ty Simpson kind of fallen out of the race. They don't really have a whole lot of pieces. I mean, I guess Jermaine Burton at receiver, but last year he didn't even have 700 yards receiving. Kool-Aid McKinstry, definitely the big player, but that's really the only big name that this team has other than Dallas Turner at linebacker. That's really like the only big name that people know around the country on this Alabama team. I think they're in a little bit of a different spot than they've ever been. They have some tough games at Mississippi State, at Texas A&M. They do get Tennessee and LSU at home, a bye week in between. But even Arkansas at home and on the road at Auburn. I know we don't expect Auburn to be very good, but in a rivalry game, we saw what happened the last time that game was in Jordan-Hare. Bryce Young had to lead them 96 yards in under a minute to tie that game up and send it to overtime in a 10-7. It was 10-7, right?
The game ended 24-22. I forget what the score was going into it, but the game ended 24-22.
Yeah, it was something like that. And I think it was not 10-7, 10-3 before he let them down. So very low scoring game, especially in regulation. So who knows what Alabama's going to be? They still have the best head coach in the country by far, Nick Saban. So we'll see what kind of magic he can work. But we've also seen what's happened with his equivalent in the NFL and Belichick without some of these big pieces that he's had in the past. He didn't do very good last year or the year before. Maybe that it's Saban's time and that happens to him. I don't know. We'll have to see. But I don't expect a whole lot out of Alabama this year. I think 10-2 probably. I definitely think they lose that Texas game week 2.
Yeah, I think this Alabama team, they're in a difficult spot. I have Alabama at number 2 as well. I just see too many question marks for an Alabama team that, you have home field advantage against LSU and against Tennessee and even against Arkansas and Texas as well. But really, I think that this Alabama team very easily could lose a road game to Texas A&M. They could lose to Tennessee again. They could lose to Arkansas. They could lose to Texas. They could lose to LSU. They could even lose the road game against Kentucky. This is a Alabama team that's very vulnerable on both sides of the ball, both offensively and defensively. Defensively, you lose a lot of your linebacking core as well as your 2 safeties. So I think that you're looking in a very dark spot if you're the Alabama Crimson Tide. If you're looking at winning this division, I think the path goes through Baton Rouge.
Yeah, I think so too. I have LSU at number 1. But I do think the thing with LSU is that week 1 game against Florida State could really make or break their season. If they get blown out or blow Florida State out in that game, that could really make or break their entire season right there. I think that is a huge game, college football playoff level game that we get blessed with week 1. It's going to be a great matchup. I'm excited for it, but I just think LSU has the most talent. They have probably the best schedule of the top 3 teams. They do have to go to Ole Miss and to Alabama, but other than that, it pretty much lines up. They get a lot of their tougher games at home or at a neutral site. So I like the way the schedule lines up for LSU, and I think that they're going to have a big season for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. So that is I'll say it. I have LSU, like I said. I think the road goes through Baton Rouge. I think really what it comes down to is who has the best quarterback in this division, and that's just simply Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels, I think, is going to be able to carry LSU through its weaknesses and its flaws because there really isn't that same powerhouse that the SEC West usually has, and just being a complete and utter powerhouse. This is a division that's a little bit weaker in that other than maybe Miss State or maybe I could honestly see scenarios that any of these teams win the division, even Auburn or Miss State, even Texas A&M, even Ole Miss or Arkansas. I don't think it is out of the realm of possibility the same way that it would be for a Florida or a Vanderbilt or a Mizzou or stuff like that in the East Division. So that's going to wrap up today's podcast and show. So make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below, whatever your channel you're watching on, and make sure that you help College Football Roundup reach their goal of 100 subscribers as we're marching our way towards college football season.